And speaking of those risk factors, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. We go a little bit further down in the financial statements. You can see these are long documents. Lawyers get paid a lot of money and spend a lot of time to make sure these are as compliant as possible with SEC rules. And we see a section here called risk factors. And these are essentially lists, paragraphs of things that relate to what the company has done, what the company is doing, that they want to essentially disclaim. They want to tell investors, hey, we're making our best guesses. We're fulfilling our fiduciary duties in running this company, but we don't know everything. Nobody can see the future, so we're doing our best. And so we have this section here that talks about the restructuring. And it says, we may not realize the expected financial and operational benefits of our recently announced restructuring plan, and its implementation may negatively impact our business. In February 2019, we announced a restructuring plan under which we plan to refocus our resources on our largest opportunities and to remove unnecessary levels of complexity and duplication from certain parts of our business. While we believe this restructuring plan will enable us to provide better opportunities for talent and greater expertise and scale on behalf of our business units, our ability to achieve the desired and anticipated benefits from the restructuring plan within our desired and expected time frame is subject to many estimates and assumptions, and the actual savings and timing for those savings may vary materially based on factors such as local labor regulations, negotiations with third parties, and operational requirements. These estimates and assumptions are also subject to significant economic, competitive, and other uncertainties, some of which are beyond our control. Further, there can be no assurance that our business will be more efficient or effective than prior to implementation of the plan, or that additional restructuring plans will not be required or implemented in the future. The implementation of this restructuring plan may also be costly and disruptive to our business or have other negative consequences, such as attrition beyond our planned reduction in workforce, or negative impacts on employee morale and productivity, or on our ability to attract and retain highly skilled employees. Any of these consequences could negatively impact our business. And so the reason I highlighted this, the reason I wanted to discuss this is another kind of item that Daniel Ahmad had highlighted in his tweets and that has been picked up in certain circles. I saw this tweet earlier today, and I looked at this article, and it essentially takes that language that we just read. This is a tweet from PC Games Insider, which isn't a periodical I'm familiar with, but it says, in its 10K SEC filing, Activision Blizzard has said last month's job cuts could potentially have a negative impact on its business, and reports it as if a revelation that Activision doesn't know what it's doing and that it doesn't know whether the restructuring was a good idea or not, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to just kind of reframe that from a lawyer's perspective just for a second. I don't think there's any guarantees that Activision made a good call or not in respect to the restructuring. But if we look at where this is positioned in the financial statements, in the risk factors, and we look at some of these other ones, it's very normal for a company to essentially say, hey, we can't read the future. So yeah, we made this restructuring because we think this is the best way to profitability in the future. We do. We think it's the best call. But we don't know how everybody in our workforce is going to react to it. We don't know whether the next guy we try to recruit to a highly paid position in our companies will sit down in front of us and say, yeah, I would, except you fired all those people last year, so I don't want to take that job. We simply don't know. And it's our job when we're reporting to our investors to say the things we don't know, to kind of look out into the future and say, here are the bad things that could happen to us. Frankly, you want your management, you want your board, you want your company to be thinking of these things. Hey, we made these decisions. How could these go wrong? What are the ways in which this could hurt us? Because that's how you plan for the future. That's how you plan for those things. That's how you try to make sure that you're insulated from those occurrences, is by thinking about them. That's one of the reasons you hire lawyers, frankly, is for a lawyer to take a look from a third-party perspective at the contract you have, at the organization you have, at the management structure you have, and say, hey, have you thought about the fact that you have an even number of board members and that you could tie and then you could potentially lose your company to a court action, et cetera, et cetera? You want the lawyer to look at something from afar and say, hey, you did this restructuring, but have you thought about how people might react to it in the future? Have you thought about how there might be problematic negotiations, or you might run out of people in a fashion that you didn't anticipate, that you overfired, or that other people could leave? You see, there's a reference to attrition greater than what we had intended, that when you fire 800 people, maybe another 400 say, you know what, I don't like this place, and they start looking around. That's going to be part and parcel of this, and they don't know how that's going to react because they can't see the future. And some of these other risk factors are we depend on a relatively small number of franchises for profit. If we do not consistently deliver popular, high-quality content, or if consumers prefer competing products, our business might be negatively impacted. We don't know what's going to happen. We only have a small number of brands. If everybody decides tomorrow that they don't like Call of Duty, that's going to be a problem for our bottom line. And so this is a normal, essentially required function of financial statements, and to report it as differently than that is a problem. And I think it's a problem that is in the game industry maybe more specifically than others, but that there are a lot of folks out there writing articles that are making commentary that don't have a lot of familiarity with how financial statements work, with how the business of video games work, with how the business of anything really works. And so I want to try to at least illuminate that a little bit, that this is not at all unusual. This is exactly the kind of language that would be expected from a massive layoff/restructuring like the one Activision did. And so it doesn't really say anything about how they feel about it other than here are the ways that it could go wrong. And we still thought it was a good idea, even though that is existent as a way this could go wrong.